now have a reading by entitled Working Together by David White. We shape ourselves to fit this world, and by the world are shaped again. The visible and the invisible working together in common cause to produce the miraculous. I am thinking of the way the intangible air passed at speed round a shaped wing easily holds our weight. So may we in this life trust those elements we have yet to see or imagine, and look for the true shape of our own self by forming it well to the great intangibles about us.
I want to begin with a quote from Jonathan Gottschall, who wrote a book called The Storytelling Animal. He says, story fulfills its ancient function of binding society by reinforcing a set of common values and strengthening the ties of common culture. Story enculturates the youth. It defines people. It tells us what is laudable and what is contemptible. It subtly and constantly encourages us to be decent instead of decadent. Story is the grease and glue of society. By encouraging us to behave well, story reduces social friction while uniting people around common story or common values. Story, Gottschall concludes, makes us one. And so I have some stories that I want to share. Here's the first one. If you've seen the movie or the musical or the movie of the musical Come From Away, then you know the story of Gander in Newfoundland. Gander sports a large airport that serves as a refueling site for many transatlantic flights. It's also a testing ground for large aircraft, particularly for crosswind testing. On September 11th, 2001, as Americans reeled with the news of 4 planes being used as bomb to attack, air traffic was quickly stopped and those planes in the air were diverted to safety. 38 planes, totaling over 6,500 passengers and crew, landed in Gander in a matter of hours. Now, while Gander didn't receive as many planes as Halifax, Nova Scotia, or Vancouver, British Columbia, Gander was notable because despite the large airfield, it's an incredibly small town with less than 12,000 people. And it's notable because most of those residents dropped everything to house, feed, and entertain those travelers for nearly a week. As the reality of what is happening hits them, they shift into gear because folks will need beds and food and toothbrushes and diapers for the babies and formula, and well, there's got to be a lot of women, so we're going to need sanitary things and tampons and refills on prescriptions, and the Lions Club is looking for extra toilet paper if you have any extra. And after 6 or so days, the last of the planes had left and the people of Gander went back to their everyday lives. Another story. Also a plane crash. On December 21st, 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 was making its way from Frankfurt to Detroit and was bombed shortly after a stop in London. It subsequently crashed in Lockerbie, Scotland, killing all 295 people on board as well as 11 Lockerbie residents. Volunteers from the town, which numbers only about 4,100 people, swung into action to house and feed the relatives who came by the hundreds to identify the dead. They set up and staffed canteens, which stayed open 24 hours a day, and offered the relatives, as well as soldiers, police officers, and social workers, free sandwiches, hot meals, beverages, counseling, beds. While airline and safety officials investigated and cleaned up the debris, women from Lockerbie washed, dried, and ironed every piece of clothing that was found along with the books, jewelry, ticket stubs, anything left that was a connection to the lost loved ones. The woman would collect these belongings carefully and put a bundle of homegrown lavender on top before sealing the box. It was months before the last of the outside helpers and investigators left, but the bonds forged the townspeople together forever. Another story with 99% less disaster. It's often said that New Yorkers are not nice, and that's true in a way. People who live in New York City for any length of time, like I did, learn early on that there is no escaping other people. So they develop this innate ability to create bubbles of privacy that travel with them on the streets, on the subway, in restaurants, and shops. But New Yorkers are the kindest people I know. If you drop something, a New Yorker will probably help pick it up. If you're knocked down or run into, like I was, by, of all people, Sarah Jessica Parker, there was a moment, a New Yorker will pick you up and apologize profusely. Yes, that really happened. If you're a Black person struggling to hail a cab, a white New Yorker may hail one for you. And if you're in a bodega like the Olive Tree across from Union Theological Seminary, where I went, well, when a loud noise startles the bodega cat, who zooms off the top of a shelf, knocking glass bottles and cereal boxes, and one of the bottles hits an older woman in the head, and the Rice Krispies mixed with Pepsi create a slippery slurry that a man with an armful of groceries slides like he's reaching for first base. New Yorkers will call 911, help people up, start clearing the debris, hand the bodega owner paper towels and a trash bag, find some ice for the woman, and not leave until the mess is cleared. The injured people are seen, and everyone gets what they came for: coffee, a bacon, egg, and cheese, an energy drink, a can of soup, and they might even add a few extra items, some candy, a piece of fruit, just so the bodega owner doesn't lose too much money from lost product. These and other stories I've told since I started here, like the one about Faiza's hijab, or Wanda's roses, or Mary's extraordinary day, or James Otis's gifts. These are stories of kindness, stories of how people work together to accomplish something they might not have imagined possible. But I think they also get to something deeper than that. They get to true generosity. The generosity that connects us to one another in interdependence and mutuality and covenant. We too often use the word generosity to relate to money, or at the very least, some sort of exchange. We're barreling toward the holiday season now, when the gifts are plentiful, and why was Feliz Navidad already playing in the mechanics waiting room last week? Okay, sorry. Fine. And some of us, among us, hope that employers might be generous with bonuses. And indeed, generosity with our treasure is important, even in our congregations. It takes money to run an institution, and honestly, even more money as we face significantly higher costs in groceries to insurance. Generosity of our time and talent matters too, from coming to events to serving on committees or doing important tasks. I think Lydia identified over 100 little jobs that this small congregation of under 60 does to keep the place going. And you would not be able to hear me if it were not for the talents and time of our tech crew, and you wouldn't be fed by the great music we've heard were it not for the talents and times of our choir. We would not be fed afterwards were it not for the grace and time of people who bring our hospitality. But even that does not really get to the heart of the topic for me. Because generosity is deeper than what I give or do to make the thing I need or want happen. Generosity is what happens when our spirits and our hearts break open. And Lord knows we need more spirits and hearts to break open. I am, in fact, appalled that the assertion that empathy is weak is even being talked about out in the world. But here we are. It's an idea born of a misinterpretation of rugged individualism with a side of authoritarianism. It's Ayn Rand on full display, an objectivism that refuses to see other people except as stepping stones. And when something good is done, it comes with a price and an expectation of quid pro quo. Yes, here comes my anti-corporatism again, because we know that big corporations don't give to charity because it's the right thing to do most of the time. They do it for the tax breaks. In fact, retail corporations like grocery stores will encourage you, the much less wealthy customer, to make charitable donations that they get to claim under their name so they can get the tax breaks without paying out. And we know that only a handful of American billionaires give more than 1% of their wealth to charity. I heard recently the estimation that Elon Musk could solve world hunger forever and still have over $100 billion in the bank. But they don't do it because empathy is weak and they want a return on investment. When it comes to charitable acts, those who believe only in looking out for themselves would rather walk around somebody collapsed on a sidewalk than lend a helping hand. They'd rather point at the unhoused person sleeping in the doorway than hand them a few bucks to get a meal or help make a call to get them shelter. And unfortunately, this sometimes shows up in progressive spaces. This culture, this individualistic, capitalistic, image-focused culture that leads even good people to do things for likes and follows and how it makes them appear. And when that seeps into our congregations, well, that's when we get understaffed committees, no one wanting to help with projects or serve on the board, and then we get resentful, burnout leaders who half the time wind up leaving entirely. Now, I should say that I wrote that paragraph for a congregation where that exactly happened. But what I saw the day before I preached it to them, 20 people came, 20 out of a membership of 58, came here to do a cleanup. That's a third of us. It was incredible. These 100 jobs that I mentioned earlier, people are doing them and joyfully and sharing the load and inviting people in. We're about to finalize the new processes for our tech and bring new people on because people are excited. There are so many things happening. Every time I drive up, there is progress, there is hope, right? But it's important for us to remember and not rest on our laurels, to remember that there are people hoping to help, people who need help. Anyway, this generosity, compassion, empathy thing can seem like a trap because if it's not about doing anything to get something, why do we do anything for each other? What do we owe one another? Do we owe anything to one another? This is the central question of perhaps the most remarkable half hour on television, The Good Place, starring Kristen Bell and Ted Danson. The show is set primarily in the afterlife and follows the recently deceased Eleanor, a self-described Arizona trash bag, who finds herself in the good place, but probably by mistake. Over the course of the show, which ended in 2020 and is now available to stream. It's 4 seasons, fairly short. In this show, we are taken on an adventure to discover the truth of the afterlife, brimming with hilarious comedy and moral philosophy, considering what it means to be good, how we can improve, what does goodness mean. Without spoiling it too much, because if you haven't watched it, you need to watch it. It's streaming multiple places. At some point in this adventure, we see Eleanor alive and back on Earth. In this instance, she doesn't die, but instead has a near-death experience. And it changes her life. She decides then and there to quit her terrible telemarketing job and becomes a canvasser for an environmental justice group. She confesses to harm she's done and seeks forgiveness. And every day she makes a conscious choice toward compassion, generosity, and empathy. About a year in, struggling to make sense of all she has done, Eleanor realizes that she has lost some lifelong friends, is still in a low-paying job, and over, her acts of generosity are either unnoticed or met with derision. She's facing a dilemma that philosophers call the moral desert. The moral desert is about our thinking that we should get a prize for doing good. After all, we see bad people get rewarded, be successful, have it all. And at some level we think, well, if you get nothing for being good, then what the hell? As Eleanor says to her activist coworker, being good is for suckers. What do you even get out of it? And her coworker replies, a feeling of fulfillment in your soul. Eleanor pauses and then responds, gross. But what Eleanor learns over time is that what we owe each other is our empathy, our compassion, our generosity. And when we give of those things freely, we do get them in return. Maybe not in the same form. And maybe it is just a feeling of fulfillment in our souls or peace that begins in our own hearts. But we do find connection to one another. Eleanor started doing good out of a sense of gratefulness for her own life and took up the call of intimate justice, acting justly among individuals in and around our lives. She became kinder, apologized, made a conscious effort to do what was right. And we can all do that. I mean, that's where it starts, right? It starts with you, me, and your family, and the people sitting next to you, and coworkers, and the barista, and the cashier. This is what happens when grace softens our heart and love melts away disconnection. It starts with small kindnesses, like we saw in Gander, Lockerbie, the olive tree, like I often see among you all. Small kindnesses beget other small kindnesses. Sometimes small kindnesses get generously passed down, like a recipe, leaving a legacy of kindness.
And now we'll have our second reading this morning, Pie with Spirits by Mary Willemeyer. This is the very pumpkin pie my grandmother made. Almost. She was a modern woman who knew how to follow recipes. Receipts, she called them, because they had been received. She had a rule for pie crust that was constant until, from time to time, it changed. I have that rule in turn, and it has moved on just a bit from where she had left it. This is my special shared moment with her, departed a quarter century ago. As I work, I am all myself in all ages, and the thought of my tall son comes to join us, though he hardly knew her. He makes pies with wild abandon, sculpting them from material and artistry. He has received pie somehow at the level of soul. The three of us make pie together, preheating the oven, cutting butter into flour, adding water, flouring a board, rolling the crust. To honor her, I followed the recipe. To honor him, I change just one thing. To honor myself, I take my time and smile.
And so we've all received recipes. Sometimes we've changed them. They've strayed a little from where they started. They've been passed down. There's one recipe that I have shared with many people, and I call it Grandma Debus's sauerbraten. It's her secret sauerbraten recipe. And the secret is that the recipe originated in the gourmet cookbook, but nobody needs to know that, except for you all because I'm telling you. And it's changed a little bit over time since we first started making it in the 60s. The recipe I hold in my hand that will be part of our ritual is for almond crescents, this incredibly light, delicate cookie that was my father's favorite. And as I sorted through the recipe cards, some written in my mother's hand, some written in my sister's hand, a couple written in my hand, I looked at this recipe and I remembered not just my mother and my father and my sister, but not just my mother and my sister, but my father and my brother, who also insists on eating them to remember Dad. These recipes that we carry are kindnesses. And yes, until I moved down here, I would make almond crescents for my brother. He was the only one who really liked them, although I've come to love them now. Right? Just one of many stories we have of these recipes. And there's something about sharing a recipe that is a step beyond the sharing of the food, which is also really good, don't get me wrong. Like, I want to share all the food, right? But to have the recipe, and you see it's from the kitchen of, oh yeah, I remember when we discovered that. I remember why we call it what we call it. My mother, I think I have the card. My mother had a great recipe for braised beef, but because it comes out red, we all called it red stew. And on one of the cards that I'm keeping, it says braised beef, and in parentheses, my children call this red stew. It's a broccoli salad that we first discovered from the school my sister taught at. I'm sure it's just a broccoli salad that you can find the recipe for all sorts of places, but we call it by the name of the school. It's Desago salad. Okay? We have these stories. We have these great stories, and it's so wonderful to share them. So we're going to do a bit of a ritual. I think I've done a blessing blender with you all before, where we wrote a blessing and we passed them 2 or 3 times. We're going to do the same with these recipes. So if you don't have a recipe card or a printout, go ahead and get one. Beth has got the book. And then what I want you to do is take a look at it. If you've got a phone and can take a picture and you're desperate for the recipe right now before you let it go ahead and do that. But then I'm going to invite everyone who is able to stand and walk around a bit, greet someone with a moment of blessing, and exchange the recipes. But you're going to do that like 3 or 4 different times. So you don't know for sure who passed on the recipe you're going to share. And while we do that, we'll just sort of hum, "We Give Thanks." Let us come back. I am so excited. I am looking at a recipe that I've received for cannoli dip from Jan. And I am so excited to share these. Now, before we bless these recipes, I just want to say, if you can, either send a photo of the recipe to me or write it out, send a link to the recipe, because Jan and Stephen are going to begin work on a recipe book as a fundraiser for this congregation. And these recipes, not just the ones from my family, but all of your recipes and more, should make up the recipes the love that we share. So hold the recipe card or paper in your hand as we bless them. May these recipes lead to nourishment. May the nourishment be shared. May we remember the generosity of those who shared these delicious memories. And may we continue the legacy of kindness. May we embrace spiritual generosity, heart-led empathy, and grace-filled compassion, and remember the gifts of love that we share. May love guide us.